At the very end of last year, Mage's director Makoto Asada had announced via an interview with Famitsu that to commemorate Steins Gate's 15th anniversary, they would be releasing a long-awaited sequel. So most of us were thinking that this was going to be Steins something, the previously announced thematic sequel to Steins Gate, which would serve as the next mainline entry. And there's still a chance that's what he was referring to back then. But today, at the Steins Gate 15th anniversary live event, they didn't announce Steins something. They announced Steins Gate Reboot, which is scheduled for release in 2025. Now, some of you might be initially thinking that there's absolutely no reason why an easily accessible game like Steins Gate, which already got a remake 6 years ago, should be getting another remake. After all, the series already has hundreds upon hundreds of hours worth of content, and they've already announced a ton of other unreleased projects like Steins Gate Zero Elite, Steins something, as well as the Hollywood live-action adaptation. And they've obviously given little to no update on all of those in quite some time. But hear me out. Steins Gate Reboot might genuinely be incredibly interesting. If you've played through Anonymous Code, there should be an extremely obvious implication behind the very concept of a Steins Gate reboot, that being that this might not simply be another remake like Steins Gate Elite, but rather a meta sequel reboot akin to the Final Fantasy VII Remake and Higurashi Go. From this point onwards, I will be discussing spoilers for the entire Science Adventure series, including Anonymous Code. So, the Worldline collapse, or Mega Shift at the end of Anonymous Code, quite literally reboots the entirety of Gaia, the Earth simulator in which the series takes place in. As a consequence of the Worldline collapse, every world layer within the simulation is reset to parity with the topmost world layer, meaning that every world layer is now on the same world line as topside. This effectively also reboots the entire series itself and likely makes a whole new continuity. With the title being Steins Gate Reboot and not Steins Gate Remake, that would imply some connection to the continuity reset. For this, and a number of other reasons, I and quite a few others suspect that Steins Gate Reboot may be a version of Steins Gate that takes place after the Worldline collapse in the post-Anonymous Code continuity. And in turn, that'd make it a meta sequel to the original Steins Gate and not simply just a Steins Gate Elite 2.0 style pure remake set in the original continuity pre-collapse. They've only announced a couple of details about Steins Gate Reboot so far, that it's a remake of the original story with new graphics and some story additions. But given that they did Steins Gate Elite back in 2018, and it's easily accessible on modern gaming platforms, I sincerely doubt they're just going to be doing another simple remake here. There's of course still a chance that this does end up simply being a soulless low-effort cash grab game, which would be extremely disappointing, given how amazing of an opportunity this is. But given all the circumstances, I do not believe they would needlessly make another Steins Gate remake if there was no narrative reason for doing one. I think doing it as a meta sequel also gives them a fantastic chance to make something that bridges Steins Gate, Anonymous Code, and Steins something, which I think may be very well needed. If Steins something takes place after the Worldline collapse, but in 2025 or 2026 like many of us expect, then seeing the post-collapse world's version of the events of Steins Gate would be very useful, and perhaps borderline necessary to see before Steins something. And if Steins something were to take place before the Worldline collapse, then it'd just end up feeling like a filler entry because the Worldline collapse or Mega Shift would just undo its events not too long down the line anyways. And at that point, Steins Gate Reboot would be completely useless. So both Steins Gate Reboot and Steins something taking place post-collapse would just make most sense story-wise. Speaking of Steins something, some of you might have been suspecting that Steins Gate Reboot and Steins something were the same exact project, but earlier on his Twitcasting livestream, Chiyomaro had apparently confirmed that Steins Gate Reboot and Steins something are two different projects, both of which are in the works right now. Interestingly, he apparently also said that he himself was not very involved in Steins Gate Reboot and was instead working on something different, which many of us believe to likely be Steins something. I personally do not think that Chiyomaro being uninvolved makes it particularly less likely that Steins Gate Reboot is not the post-collapse version of the events of Steins Gate. From the beginning, Chiyomaru has always just been the ideas man anyhow, and Hayashi's mostly been the actual series writer. So as long as Hayashi, Matsubara, and some senior staff members are involved, I think that's all that really matters. But I do think that Chiyomaru's lack of involvement does make it more likely that the bulk of Steins Gate Reboot will end up largely being the same as the original Steins Gate anyway. So even as a meta sequel taking place in the post-Anonymous Code continuity, I think it'll be maybe 90% similar to the original story anyhow. Part of me also doubts that they'd want to make Steins something inaccessible to people who've played the original Steins Gate but haven't played Reboot, and making Steins Gate Reboot such an ambitious project to begin with would also potentially divert too many resources away from Steins Something, which is the much more important title. Really though, I would absolutely love to see Steins Gate Reboot completely go off the rails and become a very different story. It wouldn't be the first time the series has done that. The novelizations for My Darling's Embrace and Linear Bounded Phonogram, My Undarling's Embrace and Linear Bounded Mosaicism respectively, are half adaptations and half completely original content with some mind-blowing implications. And the Steins Gate Zero anime was outright a sequel to the Steins Gate Zero visual novel rather than a traditional conventional adaptation. So the series isn't new to going completely off the rails when revisiting stories. Another reason I suspect this to be a sequel is because of the 15th anniversary marketing. For the last few projects, they've plastered SG to be continue all over everything, and if it were just referring to Steins Something, then you would expect it to be Steins to be continued rather than just SG. Moreover, the One World event literally began with a transition from Polon driving his Graper to the One World logo, which consists of the Earth entirely in monochrome, as if you were viewing it from outside the low region. That to me suggests some tie-in between Steins Gate Reboot, which was the event's big announcement, and Anonymous Code. Now, I wanted to circle back to Makoto Asada's comments back in Famitsu's New Year's article. Mages had announced that their plans for 2024 were sequels for 3 of their big IPs, Memories Off, Corpse Party, and Steins Gate. Obviously, their 2024 plans have all been delayed into 2025. But when you look at a comment about them planning a highly anticipated sequel to release for Steins Gate's 15th anniversary, that presents far more credence to the idea that Steins Gate Reboot is a meta sequel and not a pure remake on a different world layer in the original series continuity. There's absolutely no reason for them to make a second remake of Steins Gate when the last remake is the 3rd most recent new SciDV game. It's very possible that Asada was referring to Steins in that interview as we all initially thought, but if that's the case, they would have had to have been far enough along development to foresee themselves releasing the game in 2024. But besides all that, some interesting things of note about Steins Gate Reboot are the new character designs and the new logo. For most of the cast, the character designs remain the same but with updated art by Huke. The 2 exceptions to this are Mayuri and Daru. Mayuri's dress is different from how it is in the original game, with her new outfit revealing a little bit more of her shoulders, and Daru the super hacker, for whatever reason, has the exact same sprite as he does in the original, and I think that's very suspicious that the hacker character out of everyone is the one who remains unchanged. This could be a reach, but I suspect there might be a meta or story-related reason behind the choice for Mayuri and Daru's character designs. As for the new logo, intriguingly, there appear to be more cracks in the title text than were present in the original logo. Moreover, this new logo also has a new subtitle. The subtitle at first glance appears to be in more sensical English than the original one in Japanese. That is, until you look at this line and realize that this typo-ridden excuse for a new subtitle may have been copied over from a translation on the Steins Gate wiki, which had been up there ever since a complete rando put it on there in 2017. And I guess those typos carried over into the official subtitle. That to me is completely and utterly baffling, when they have had a perfectly good translation of the logo subtitle in-game. But anyhow, this is all a very unexpected, but potentially welcome announcement depending on what they actually do with it. If this is the version of Steins Gate that takes place after the Worldline collapse, then this could be crazy good, even if it's mostly the same as the original story. If it's nothing more than a simple remake on a different world layer, and before the Worldline collapse, then that would be very disappointing. But even then, since it doesn't have to worry about matching anything with animation like Steins Gate Elite did, I don't suppose it would have any reason to cut out 35% of the original script. And if they're just going to expand upon the original story, one thing that I think could be very cool would be if they could incorporate content from some of Steins Gate's side material into the reboot, things like Brownian Motion of Love and Hate, and Babel of the Grieved Maze especially. If they could add an Amoika route, taking in material from Height of the Dark Dimension, that would also be super cool. But let me know your thoughts on the Steins Gate reboot, as well as what you'd like to see from it. Do you think it's just going to be a remake that takes place before the Worldline collapse? Or do you think this is the true start of the post-Anonymous Code continuity? With that in mind, thank you for watching, and shout out to Fasti and the Kirikiri Basara team for their amazing coverage of the live event, as well as the admins and regulars of the Beyond the Gate and Occultic Code Discord servers for their wonderful observations, discussions, and analyses regarding the implications of Anonymous Code. Shout out to Riggs especially.